Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, February 16th, 2022, and today we're going to be talking about the state of Missouri and this new poll out of the state that shows that the Republican Party could be in for a bit of trouble if the former governor Eric Greitens ends up becoming the Republican nominee for Senate in 2022. Now, looking at the Senate race in the state of Missouri, technically speaking, I mean, it is a congressional race, but we rarely ever refer to it as that. There are a bunch of Republicans running for the top position of senator from the state of Missouri. What you find is that former Governor Eric Greitens, who is currently leading in the polls, is running. You also have Vicky Hartzler. She is a United States representative from the 4th Congressional District in Missouri. You also have Billy Young, who is the Missouri's 7th Congressional District representative. You also have Dave Schatz, who is the president pro tempore of the Missouri Senate, and Eric Schmidt, the Missouri Attorney General, and a bunch of other people that are deciding to run for Senate in the state of Missouri. Now, looking at the candidate list here, one might assume that the former governor would have that frontrunner status, and they would be correct. But there are representatives on here who could pose significant threats to Eric Greitens becoming the next senator of the state of Missouri, simply because they could be, in fact, deemed more electable. Looking at the polling data, what you will find is that Eric Greitens has maintained a lead, but not with other candidates starting to uptick in terms of support statewide. Looking at the very first polls from March of 2021, Eric Greitens had a lead with 36% and 40%. You also saw him winning with 34%, 27%, 36%, 27, 27, 27, 28. And you can see that there has been a decrease, a significant one at that. Going from 40% down to 27 is pretty alarming. But again, that comes as a result of other candidates entering into the race, more people shifting in terms of their support, and as of today, Senator Josh Hawley, who defeated Senator Claire McCaskill back in 2018, has endorsed Vicky Hartzler, essentially saying that she should become the next GOP senator from the state of Missouri because she is more electable. In terms of endorsements, what we have seen so far is that Eric Greitens has received the endorsements of many top members of the Trump administration and people very close to President Trump. You have the United States National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, a very well-known name nationwide, Sebastian Gorka, right? Ryan Zinke, right? Rudy Giuliani. These are people that are recognizable names within the GOP. You have Kimberly Guilfoyle. These are people who could very well prop up a candidate with such endorsement. As for Vicky Hartzler, she also has some pretty top names, such as the senator from Nebraska, Deb Fischer. She also has Josh Hawley, the other senator from the state of Missouri, not the one who is choosing to retire. I do not believe that Roy Blunt has made an official endorsement yet, but the point being that the endorsements are pretty far and spread out. Eric Schmidt currently receiving the endorsement here from the former United States Acting Attorney General. I believe also that Senator Ted Cruz today has announced that he will be endorsing Eric Schmidt. I don't believe that will be or is updated on here right now, but at the end of the day, what we know so far is that Ted Cruz, all of these people, Michael Flynn, Rudy Giuliani, Michelle Bachmann, which is a name that I haven't heard in a very long time, Josh Hawley, these are people that are endorsing candidates in this competitive Missouri Republican primary. But one person does seem to hold strong, and that is Eric Greitens. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that he was the former governor of the state of Missouri. The fact that he had to resign in 2018, he was actually being investigated by Josh Hawley. It's an interesting enough case, but in that point, he had to resign, and that was just the end of it. He left office, and people thought that his political career was done until he decided to run for Senate in the state of Missouri. Now, the state of Missouri actually hasn't had too many solid Republican victories in years past. The past two elections in the state of Missouri have actually been surprisingly competitive. If we take a look at the past elections, in 2018, the state of Missouri was a state where the GOP was only able to win by 5.8. Keep in mind, Donald Trump won by over 15, in fact, nearly by 20 points in the 2016 election. In 2016, in the Senate race in the state of Missouri, it went to the GOP by a margin of 2.8. Looking at the historical electability for the GOP in the state of Missouri, I honestly wouldn't exactly say that this is one of the most electable states for Republicans in the Senate races based off of its history, but knowing its demographics, knowing its current electoral status, I would absolutely say so. But in terms of the history, I wouldn't say the GOP has had resounding victories in the past. I haven't seen 2010, so I'm interested to see what the results were like in terms of the midterms here. Roy Blunt wins by 13.6, but I mean, that number is alarming in itself, too, to see that the Republicans were only able to win by 13.6 when Trump was winning in 2016 by, significant amounts. And just seeing how close it was, this exact Senate seat, in fact, how close it was back in 2016 is another reason why the GOP needs to have the right nominee. I mean, this map itself makes it look like it's a Republican landslide. There are maybe, 6 counties across the state of Missouri that ended up going blue, but in fact, the margin of victory here for Roy Blunt was a margin of less than 3 percentage points, in which Roy Blunt didn't even end up getting 50% of the vote or more. So it is something to be said about the state of Missouri nearly going to a Democrat just 6 years prior to this election, and going to a Democrat and being held by a Democrat, in fact, as recently as 5 years ago. So what I would say so far from the state of Missouri, in fact, actually nearly 3 years ago, going on 4 years, but what I would say so far is the GOP absolutely needs a strong nominee for Senate in the state of Missouri. Even though the state of Missouri might be leaning towards the right, there is always the possibility that they elect a Democrat over their counterpart simply because they do not approve of the Republican. And one might argue, this 2016 example is not necessarily fair. Maybe the presidential election was close, but it wasn't. Donald Trump won on the presidential level in the state of Missouri by an insane amount. I mean, you're talking 19 points over the Democrats in the state of Missouri, yet the Senate election is decided by just 3. Had there been a different Democrat on the ballot, or Hillary Clinton done better amongst the Democratic Party, maybe that could have carried Jason Kander across the finish line. I think there's a lot to be discussed about the possibilities that Democrats could or could not have won in the state of Missouri, but I think what the Republican Party remembers is that 2016 was competitive, and they want to do everything they can to avoid that for 2022. And it makes sense electorally. Obviously you never want to be facing off in terms of a competitive state, but the GOP actually is very limited in their possible pickup opportunities, and they want to focus all of their time and resources on these states. They want to focus on Nevada, they want to focus on Arizona, they want to focus on Colorado, they want to focus on New Hampshire, they want to focus on Georgia, because these are opportunities for the GOP. They don't want to be playing defense. They don't want to be playing a position where they have to be fighting equally for a state like Missouri, as they might in a state such as Ohio or Pennsylvania or Colorado. These states are not meant to be equivalent to a state that is traditionally very solid for the GOP. Just in terms of recent electoral history, the state of Missouri hasn't exactly been a super solid seat for the GOP when it comes down to Senate elections. But again, that could change in 2022. What I think that this poll really reflects is that voters are still undecided about whether or not they are comfortable backing Eric Greitens. Him being that, Republican governor who was essentially forced out of power is very shocking, and it is something that voters across the state will not take lightly. In 2016, Eric Greitens won by a margin of about 5 percentage points across the state of Missouri, 6 percentage points. It wasn't super impressive, but it was still a victory regardless. Later down the line, he was forced to resign, and in 2020, he was actually replaced by a much stronger GOP candidate, which was Mike Parson. Now, Mike Parson was actually serving as the governor at the time. It's just he actually assumed the role because Eric Greitens was forced to leave. But you can see the big difference. Donald Trump actually did worse in the state of Missouri in 2020 than he did in 2016, yet the Republicans significantly improved. And it wasn't because the Democrats had a weaker candidate. In fact, this Democratic nominee was the only Democratic elected statewide official prior to her leaving to run for the governor's office. What you find here is that the reason why the GOP did considerably better is because Eric Greitens was not on that ballot. And it isn't just, Republicans considering this as something that is a conspiracy theory. They're not just randomly putting out numbers simply because they think all of a sudden that Eric Greitens would be a bad nominee. They're seeing this from some of the polls that they notice. They're seeing this where there are so many undecided voters in some of these polls between Democrats. What you find here is that Eric Greitens is failing to capture 50% of the electorate. In fact, has decreased in terms of overall support relative to February of 2021. If anything, he should be doing considerably better. And the fact that he only started out in this race with an 8-point lead statewide should have also been something that was brought up as a concern for the Democratic Party and for the GOP, simply because the state of Missouri should not be decided, especially in this year, by a margin margin of just 8 points. So again, so much to unpack when it comes down to the polling data. There's a lot that indicates that Eric Greitens isn't exactly capturing the majority vote share like other Republicans easily would, and it could be facing the GOP for potentially a very competitive Missouri Senate race. I mean, I see no one else worse for the GOP to be in this position where they are turning the race that is otherwise solid red. I mean, I currently have it rated as solid red into potentially a likely seat and potentially a lean seat and potentially a tilt seat. The state of Missouri does not need to be competitive at this point in time for the sake of the Republican Party. But if it does end up happening, it will be happening because Eric Greitens is running. It will happen because there is a bad GOP nominee. Plainly put, people don't forget resignations too, kindly. They don't take this as something that is just a noble effort from Eric Greitens. They know that he was going to be found guilty, and that's why this is baggage added on to him. I mean, I think Donald Trump might end up interjecting himself in this race simply because he doesn't want to see the Republicans lose control of the state of Missouri. I mean, if there was to be a Democratic victory in the Senate election, it would be completely changing the narrative about what type of election year 2022 was. Considering that it is currently rated as safe, nobody is viewing Missouri as a pickup opportunity for the Democratic Party, except for some wishcasters or for people who want to take a look at the best case scenario for the Democratic Party. But truly speaking, there isn't much of a chance here. But the only way I could see it happening, and based off what the polls have told us so far, is if Eric Greitens becomes the Republican nominee for Senate. He could truly screw over many of these Republicans, especially down ballot. If he is the most important race that people are trying to turn out to vote for, and people don't turn out in a rate they're expecting because they aren't inspired to vote for Eric Greitens, or they don't think that he should become the next senator but won't actively vote against him, what you're going to find is that we'll have some type of tremendous impact down ballot and potentially could impact some very significant House races or state legislature races. So what I think at this point in time the Republican Party should do is at least court Donald Trump to endorse people, court Donald Trump to endorse potentially another challenger or someone who is just more resemblant of the Trump ideology. At least do something. If this was to be a strategy type of advice piece, do something to ensure that Eric Greitens does not become the next senator from the state of Missouri. That could also be baggage further down the line. With him re-entering into politics, that means there's going to be further investigations. There's going to be continued discussions about what he did in the office of governor. And while that resignation may have saved him momentarily, him becoming a senator would put him through scrutiny that he could not even dream of, could not even imagine happening to him. And it will likely come out that he has done some pretty bad things and thus pave the way for potentially a resignation and a Democratic victory in the runoff election by exploiting some of the words that would have been said in that scenario by Eric Greitens. So this is definitely a slippery slope. This is definitely a position where, the GOP could really screw themselves over in the state of Missouri. It is otherwise a very solidly Republican state, voted for Donald Trump by a super significant amount in 2016. In 2020, the state of Missouri went to the GOP by a margin of 15.4. So you're not really seeing any type of substantial changes when it comes down to the overall, partisan vote share here. But what you are going to see is that it would end up fracturing the GOP's control in the state of Missouri, and it would send a very clear message that 2022 was, in fact, not a red wave year. And I think that would be a major concern for the GOP because optics is everything. And if 2022 doesn't end up in a way that is considerably unfavorable for the Democratic Party, what you're going to find is Democrats will use that as a means of arguing a moral victory, of arguing that they are still in play for 2024 and beyond. And if they don't lose control of the Senate because of Eric Greitens or because there is resources allocated to Missouri because Eric Greitens becomes that nominee just as more of a damage control type of thing from the NRSC, I think that we would be in for a pretty wild ride, to say the least. So overall, I think that we are going to see Donald Trump endorse someone soon, and I don't think it'll be Eric Greitens. At the end of the day, this is a failed candidate, someone who has tried and lost and will likely do so again when it comes down to this primary. I'm confident that any of these Republicans would end up winning the general election, though. I do think that while voters do care, 2022 is still going to be a year in which it is significantly pushed back on the Democratic Party, and people will just vote for the GOP just simply because they can, because they're expressing their discontent, their concern with the Democratic Party. I think that that's something that is going to be very probable. I also think, looking at a lot of these candidates here, some of them aren't polling so high. Eric Greitens, while being at 28%, 27% is good for comparison to 7, 5, and 1, but it isn't that good compared to 23, 24, 15, 19, 16. Those are numbers that could pose very significant threats to Eric Greitens, and if they end up joining forces, if any of these people, even the 1%, decide to move over with forces to either, side Eric Greitens or Vicky Hartzler or Eric Schmidt, what you are going to find is that the Republican Party is going to coalesce, and some numbers are starting to peel away from each other, and I think that what we will find is that Vicky Hartzler and Eric Schmidt would end up propping themselves up and doing better in opinion polling data, and do better when it comes down to the actual primary vote, simply because Eric Greitens has this reputation that he's going to lose, and I don't think he's going to get as many top-name endorsements any further, and that it is entirely possible for Eric Schmidt or Vicky Hartzler to end up getting them instead. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.